So, yeah, I'm half Brittany Spaniel and half Border Collie, and afraid of water. What are you afraid of? Buttons? Really? You're kidding. Come on, you can do it. Thank you for watching.
Hi, welcome to Angels Nook. This video is going to be about the differences in how to apply and use the water-based antiquing gels by Heirloom Traditions Paint. There's two different ways that are commonly done to apply it and wipe it off, or to dry brush with it. I'm going to show you both techniques. I'm not going to do it over tons of colors. That's something for you to experiment with yourself, but I do want you to see how different it looks over black and over white. I'm also using ornate frames because those are the easiest to let you see the technique and how it works. But the technique of applying and wiping back is the same on a flat surface. It's just you want to keep going in smooth, straight strokes. And if you want to dry brush to add highlights, that is the same technique with how you would use the brush. So when I do this, there's not going to be endless chapters in this because they're going to get too close for even the chapters to be able to be inserted. But I'm going to go back and forth with the different antiquing gels between doing it over black and doing it over white on the first frame so that you can see how it looks if you fully apply it, wipe it back, or you just dry brush it on side by side. Then I'm also going to be using a frame that has a lot of copper metallic tones to it and dark tones on it, and show you what happens if you apply the antiquing gels over that finish, that type of finish, to tone it down. So that's where we're going to be going today. So there's a limited number of places that I can efficiently get you to in the video. And I suggest you watch more than one, and if you're going to do this, practice on something else, not your finished piece. You absolutely must let the antiquing gel, the paint base, the bottom layer of what you're doing, you must let that dry for 48 hours before you apply any of the antiquing gels. Otherwise, when you're wiping back or even when you're applying it, you can reactivate the paint underneath and you can cause some of the paint to lift or come off if you try to do it too fast. So hopefully this is going to answer a lot of questions for what the difference is in applying and wiping back and using dry brush to use these antiquing gels in a huge range of projects, just depending on what you want to do. And I'm also going to talk to you about which things look better and why over lights or darks. So let's get started. This frame lent itself to being really good for showing you how to do the different techniques because it has so much intricate raised detail on it. We'd also like for you guys to give us some feedback in the comments because we're trying a different camera setup and we need to know if that's helping you to see better and if that makes it easier to understand the process. So if it does, please give us a comment to let us know that. So the first one I'm going to do for you is not necessarily something I would do, but you need to see what happens. I'm going to put white wash antiquing gel over a section of this black here, and I'm going to wipe it back. And then I'm going to show you what it would look like if I dry brushed it. Basically what a whitewash does if you put it completely over something and wipe it back is it mutes the color. So you can probably figure out from that that it's going to take this black from black to more of a gray look. And if that's a look that you needed, then, you know, by all means do it. But I don't think it's one of the prettier ways to use antiquing gels, because you're pretty much trying to highlight details when you use it. there's what it looks like if I put it on and wipe it back. This is definitely muted to a charcoal gray as opposed to the black. And now I'm going to put it on using a dry brush. You want to get some on your brush, pounce it, and you're not using your brush straight down to get into it. You're laying your brush flat on just the tops of these, and less is more. You can always add more, but start with as little as possible to highlight the details. This has different heights. It's got some that are solid, some that are not. And hopefully you can see that. It is a softer effect. And again, when you're putting a white over a real dark and you're just highlighting, it can be a pretty stark contrast. So this is definitely not something you'd want to do on a dark door. If you had a cabinet door, a kitchen cabinet, you wouldn't want to use this as your antiquing over that because it's just going to look stark and look like the paint was not finished on it. So that's what the whitewash looks like. And I'm going to take a minute to show you what I'm going to move over to this other side here, Jim. I'm going to show you what happens if I do the opposite thing. If I take black antiquing gel and I put it into the frame. You can already see it's taking it toward a gray. And no matter how much you wipe back, a film of the original is going to be seen. This has a better look to me than going with this direction, but it totally depends on what the colors are in your home and what works in your space. So again, on this, I'm going to do the same thing with the black. Pounce some off. Use the side of the brush. And if you wanted, you could run just a tiny bit on there and just a tiny bit. Oops, that's good. The good thing with these are you can get them off pretty quick. And if I had to right now, I could wet the whole thing and take it back off, but I'm not going to because I was able to get that. So now I'm going to go back at this just slightly. There's not a line down there the way that I thought there was. And I put just a little bit on this outer edge here. So whenever you put it over the whole thing, it leaves a residue in the base. And if you put it just on the top, your valley color, your base color, stays in the valley and your highlighting is on the top. Once this dries a little bit, I'm going to show you how you can bring back out some of the details here by going back and adding your original color. But I'm going to go ahead and use weathered wood on this next section because I want you to see the difference between weathered wood and black. I want you to see how much softer weathered wood is when you use it with the dry brush technique as opposed to the black. Hopefully you can see this is a softer color. So actually, if you're wanting something to look like it has some distress with black, the weathered wood is your better choice. It's softer. If I don't want it up here in the center of this, I can wipe just that area back. I could have done the same thing on this one because it's already drying. I'd have to add some water, but you can lift those out. But this looks more like an actual age distress. Now we're going to put it down in the valley and wipe it back and let you see that. It'll definitely be a softer gray. You definitely want your base color to have dried for 48 hours before you do this, because I'm rubbing hard to lift that back off the top of the details. And there, that has got the valleys darker, but if you come back to this one up here in the corner, this is much more stark of a contrast. Both this one and the weathered wood that I just did give an aged look, but this one is softer and this one can go with warm and cool palettes. The black and white feels more like it needs, even though it's neutral colors, feels more like it needs to go with cooler colors for that high contrast. But it's always what you want to do with it. And now I'm going to start on the metallics to let you see what happens. The first one I'm going to put on here is Champagne. And I'm going to put it completely on. The metallics have a higher sheen. But even rubbing hard, you should be able to see that this is leaving a film over this. The only way I could remove this is to get the paper towel wet and use my finger and go into the areas I absolutely don't want it in. But this is a very soft effect with the champagne. And now I'm going to put it on just with a dry brushing technique. These look a little different over different colors, which should be expected. By hitting just the highlights on these pieces, you leave your valleys, and sometimes going at a 45 works better. You leave your valleys very much uncovered. So if you wanted your base color to show up more on something, you would definitely want to dry brush. I'm going to move around to this other side again, Jen, and do it over the white, the champagne over the white. There you go. The first thing I'm going to do on the white, I may not be getting all the way in there. That's not my goal right now. My goal is to show you how these change depending on what you do with them. And if you want it to cover all the way, you've got to do what I'm doing here. Swirl down into all those details. It doesn't require a massive heavy coat. And now I'm going to wipe this back. This gives the champagne over white and over light colors is a very soft look, but it keeps the sheen of the metallic and it keeps the metallic look. And here in the corner, I'm going to just highlight using dry brush. And again, especially over something like this coming at a diagonal, usually gives you the best, but my brush is flat against this. And you can, if you want, you can do a very light brush on those areas and down on the inside here, just to give it the slightest bit of color. But it's a much lighter, softer look. This, from a distance, you would not see very much of, but you would definitely pick up the details. If you look here at the white, if you're close to it, you can see the details. But here, the details are really popping out. I'm going to put the 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne into this spot. And you'll definitely be able to see some differences here. Champagne is not silver, but it looks like silver over black in many cases. Whereas on the white, it definitely showed up with the golden undertone that champagne has. And it takes a strong rub to get this off. If I were doing this around an entire frame, I would do half the frame, the other half of the frame on one side. I would not even try to do the entire side of a frame because it dries so fast, and once you can put water on it to get it off or to blend it, but it's really easy to mess up what you've already done well and be hard to match it. So now again, I'm going to go out with dry brush, just the sides of the brush. And add just a little bit on there. And I would put, if I could turn this where I could see it, I would put just a little bit on the inside there. But this is a very different, much softer effect. this is a more traditional tonal. This could go traditional, or it could work in a more modern setting. And I will go down to the other side and do this on the white to let you see it. Against the champagne, this mix of 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne looks very gold. But when you see the gold against this in a minute or two, you'll see quite a difference. Leave it plain, or a very, very light brush of this over it after you have emptied most of the paint out of the brush. By doing the dry brushing techniques here, that leaves you just enough to almost like it's slightly dusted with a golden dust there. I'm going to go back to the black and do it with gold. And again, first, you should be able to see a great deal of contrast. This almost looks orange against the other one that I just did of the mix. It's not orange, it's just that it's a very bright gold. There are a lot of good purposes for bright gold, but if I'm doing it on picture frames or I just want a low highlight with it, I prefer the mix that I use. Also, use really good paper towels. Cheap paper towels would just be shredding and sticking to this, which is not any fun when you're putting a lot of work into something. So with the gold, I'm going to dry brush it. Do that very light dusting over it. And you can see the difference. The next one I'm going to do is copper. Find me in here, Jen. Got it? Mm-hmm. Okay. Always thoroughly stir the antiquing gels. Over black, the first coat will look like rose gold. It requires a second coat to get it to fully come into its copper look. But copper is very pretty over black, or over a lot of dark colors. It's very pretty over Crete, Envy, any of your dark, warm colors, because copper is definitely a warmer tone. If you do it just as a dry brush, copper tends to pull more of its copper tone. And I'm going to go around and do it on the white. And over white, copper immediately shows its color, but still has a tendency to look like rose gold in its first coat, even though looking at it in the jar, it's a definite copper, not rose gold at all. But just like room surroundings influence color, the underneath colors that you use when you're adding antiquing also influence. Pulled too much out of there, so putting some right back in before I'm done. Helps it. And then the dry brush. And if you add it where I'm adding it right now, you don't want to add it heavy. And then you could also add it, you should actually add it on the outside edge. The last metallic I'm going to put on here is gunmetal, which in multiple coats can look silver, but it's always going to have a blue tint under it. So are you back to this area is from, there you go, got it. Gunmetal is one that's really pretty over black. And that would be a finish that you would definitely use with cool colors. Put a little bit of this on some of the highlights. Highlight some of this here, keeping that I'm using the back edge of that brush, which is one of the reasons why you have to pounce your brush to get the paint through it. I'm going to move around and do this onto the white. Making the spaces here just a little bit smaller because I forgot about vintage brown, which I will grab from the house so that you can see it as well. Dry brush. Much softer. You cannot get rid of the film of color that is left when you paint it on as a solid color. So we're going to stop the film for a second while I go find the vintage brown, and I can show you what it does. I'm putting vintage brown on. You won't see a huge amount of difference. Probably on camera, it may be almost impossible to see any difference over the black. But what happens is it will turn more toward warm embers. So if you needed a softer black, you could do this because there's some brown undertone there. But when I go to put it just on the top of the black, it's very difficult to see it at all. So putting the brown over a really dark color, unless it's enough contrast, for instance, vintage brown over Crete, over Envy, is a really good choice to use as a wash if you want to bring some brown undertone to it or you want to do some antiquing on it. Brown is your better choice with greens and even some of the blues, depending on what you want to do. So now I'm going to put some on the white. You can certainly use the stains in a similar manner, but I think the gel stains are a little easier to master, and maybe experiment with the water-based antiquing gels first, and then this last little spot here, I'm going to dry brush. Just depends on what you're trying to do. But if you want really soft distress, either vintage brown or weathered wood is your best choice. And then when you want metallics, it just depends what you want to do. The mix that I do of the 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne tends to be a neutral and works both ways. With warm and cool, champagne can often work with warm and cool, but often looks better with cooler colors. Gold definitely with warm colors, and gunmetal more with cool colors. So let's see if I can, well, you've got a good shot overhead. That's the vintage brown. The copper. Gold, the mix of gold and champagne, champagne, okay, and then whitewash over the black, black antiquing gel, weathered wood, let's see, this is the mix, or is that champagne? No, that's champagne. No, it's not. I've lost track here, guys. I am sorry. I know this one is gold, this one is copper, this is gunmetal, and this is vintage brown. I think here I forgot to do the 2 extra steps on these 2, so I apologize for that. But you can see the difference in how these look. So it makes a lot of difference in what you are creating. So it's not going to film that way, so I will just leave it down. But hopefully this has helped you. And the next segment's going to show you a frame that had gold and copper elements on it, and how changing different portions of it with the antiquing gels changes its look. I forgot to show you, but this needed to dry anyway. You have to let the antiquing layer dry, preferably at least 12 hours. It's been really hot out here in the shop because we shut the AC off when we went in. So that helped to harden up the antiquing gel that's on this. But when you have applied it over a whole section and then you've wiped back, no matter how much you wipe, you're going to leave a film on all of your high points. You may like it that way, or you may want to bring those details back to the forefront. And the primary way that you would use the technique I'm going to show you is only over the areas where that you applied the antiquing gel completely and wiped back. So first I'm going to show you the one that was black, and I used Iron Gate as the base color. So it's what I'm going to dry brush it with. So whatever your base color is, that's what you would use to bring back up more of a contrast. We'll do it to the gold. And again, you could go in the valley, you could go on the side here, you could go across the very center of these high points where it's smooth, and it's going to mute down the effect of the gold and bring back up, or any of the metallics, and bring back up the details themselves. This is over the copper. Muting it on here. You can either completely mute it, or I'm letting it bleed through a little bit, and I'm going to put a little bit here in the center. In person, it very much changes the look, and I highly suggest that whenever you decide to do something with the antiquing gels, this is where weathered wood was put on solid. And there again, it's highlighting all these details, but it's softening the effect of the paint. This is the gold mix. I'm pretty sure. But anyway, you can see the changes. I must have put some brown on that and didn't realize it. My brush must have hit it when I was working the last pieces here before. You're not trying to put on a thick coat to obliterate all of this. You're just getting the contrast back up. Gunmetal. I think gunmetal is one of the ones that really responds nicely to this. And by just brushing lightly over that center point, I soften that down. By taking what you have, you're not having to put multiple antiquing gels on there. You're just layering to get the effect you want. And if you practice on something else and you see how it looks and you compare it to the details you're trying to highlight, when you first put it onto whatever you're working on, you can spray it with water and get it right back off, as long as you let the base coat dry for 48 hours before you start putting in any antiquing gels on. So now it will go on to the metallic shelf. I'm going to show you on this particular frame, which is very coppery, some of the things that you can do using the antiquing gels to mute this, and then also what you can do to highlight after you have done that. I'm going to start with black antiquing gel, and I don't necessarily want it down yet onto, actually I do. And if I were going to mute this, I would not wipe this back at all. Hopefully, Jim, if you can move the camera so that we can see this section with this, and if you can zoom in on that, please. You should be able to see the tone of that has changed a lot. And I'm going to do the same thing down here. But what also happens is you start to lose your detailing. So I'm not getting very much antiquing gel on my brush at all. It's better to have to go back in and get more. Than to have too much when you're doing this. So that in itself would mute this down. I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes while I apply something else to this area down here that's farther below this. The first thing I'm going to apply on this to change it is the straight gold. I'm also going to put some on a plate here. Well, it's not going to work the way I wanted it to, so I'll do that differently in a minute to show you the comparison between all these. You want to pounce it so you don't have a lot on there. And then you don't go back and forth with the brush this way. You have the brush laying flat. And you're just catching the tops. You can usually go back and grab from the plate. And that has changed it. If we swoop down to the corner here, you should be able to see the difference between this and this. And now I'm going to come to here so that I can leave some copper in between. And I'm going to show you the gold mix that I do of 2 parts gold and 1 part champagne. All of these have been mixed off camera. The antiquing gels separate really quickly, so a lot of times, even when you're working, you need to re-stir them. But this is going to have a totally different tonality to it. It's going to be a much softer. It's still going to be gold, and again, it's the side of the brush trying to hit just the high points. But you can see this gold is really different than this gold. It's a much softer, brighter gold. Well, brighter's not really the right thing to say to it. And you can use the other side of the brush before you go back and re-dip. And you should see very clearly there a change in this. Now right here, just to show you a little bit of difference in what would happen here, I'm actually going to apply this gold completely on here, and then I'm going to wipe it back. So I like to put it on with a brush because I can really get into the grooves of it. But there are a lot of these frames floating around right now where the people sadly are closing up estates and they just don't fit their style because they don't like, primarily, they don't like colors. But it's not always that hard to make a big difference. So now, if I take and you really have to rub. And you can't go all the way around the frame doing this. Now that gave more of the gold, and in the middle here, I would actually go back and add a little bit back into there to even that out. Now, if I want more off of these top edges, I would get a different paper towel. I would get it wet. Wrap that wet portion around my index finger and carefully now I've brought back up the top in the copper tone, but now down in the valleys, I've got the soft gold, which again changes very much from what this looks like and what this looks like. The next one I'm going to put on is straight champagne. Champagne, to some people, when you initially look at it, looks like silver, but it is not. It is truly a true champagne. HTP did a really good job with this color. So it is like a silver and gold mix. So once it's actually on there and it dries, and especially it's going to pull it against this copper, I'll leave a space here so we can see the difference. But you want to pull that brush just the side of it along. It's another reason why you want to pounce. And in here, I want a very thin layer. It really takes very, very, very little to pull this out. Now that's completely muting that copper because of the silver undertone to the champagne. It's muting the copper, which would be a really fast change if it was just the color you didn't like. All these different tones are easy to change. Here I'm going to put the champagne in this corner. I'm going to put it on solid to let you see it. You don't have to put a big, thick coat on this. You just have to make sure you're all the way down in those valleys so that none of them have been left. And if I were doing this entire frame in one of these options, I would do a half of a side at a time, quickly moving into the next portion. But don't even try to do a whole entire side. It does not work well. That's why some people have frustration working with the antiquing gels. You could, if you smooth this all out, leave that just on there like that. Depending on how much you wanted to show through. You could stop there, or you could do what I did a few minutes ago. This other side of this is clean, it's wet. So that only the valleys have this in it. And it's very different looking than here and here. But it's just the difference in how it's being applied. And again, after doing that wet, because I cleared some here, I would go back in and take it off. And the next one I'm going to use on this is gunmetal. It is a silvery tone, but it has blue in it, which is where it gets its name, because the gun barrels, that is called that color. We're going to leave another band here of just the copper, and I'm going to put on the gunmetal. In 2 solid coats, this can definitely have a silver look to it, but it will have a blue undertone. So if you wanted more of a silver look, you would want to stay with the champagne, or even mix a little bit of the gunmetal with a little bit of champagne to find the color that you want. That's one of the cool things with these two. They can all be mixed, just like the paints can. I mean, there are some obvious things that it wouldn't do much good at all to do. If you were mixing gunmetal and gold, you're just going to come out with a muddy color that's not going to be pretty. But the champagne and the gunmetal, the champagne and the gold goes either way, because the champagne is such a neutral. And you can see the color tone here of champagne versus that blue that's coming up with the silver on this. And I will do the gunmetal down here, solid, to let you see that. Wipe it back, going across the high points, leaving it in the valleys. This works on old lamps. It's a really fast way to change up the way lamps look. And again, I'm going to use some water. You don't want it dripping wet because it will get down into what you're working on. And then stay very flat to come just across those details. And so now, instead of the gunmetal being on top, it's down in the valley. So this is gunmetal in the valleys, applied and wiped back. This is gunmetal, a little too far. This is gunmetal on the high points. This is champagne in the valleys and wiped off the high points. Champagne on just the high points, dry brushed. The 2 parts gold and 1 part champagne applied and wiped back. that gold mix applied just to the high points. Up here, the straight gold. And I actually need to, I didn't realize I did not do the gold put down into all of it. We'll do that pretty quickly. We'll lose that piece of copper there, but not a biggie. Water again, just to get it off high points so it just stays in the valleys. So you can see what that would do. That would turn it more toward a gold frame if that's what you wanted. Now back up here where there is the black was put on here. This is actually almost making this frame look like wood. And one of the things that's really pretty, if you have done that, is to take the gold that is the softer gold, the 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne mix, and use that to just very lightly come across the details. And that gives a really soft, elegant look. Either one of these are so soft and neutral they would go with modern elements, and some of the others would as well. The last thing I want to show you is how easy it is to get this off if you put it on and decide, I don't like that at all. It's really a good idea to test it on something else first, but not everybody does that. We've all jumped into a project and gone, woo, I like that. I'm just gonna go. I know I can do this. I get this technique, I can do this. And then we look at the colors and think, oh, that's not the color I wanted. Now what do I do? Because it's already on there and it's already drying. Because honestly, this does dry. It has work time, longer work time in it, but only if you're misting with water and working with it immediately. The paint itself, the regular paint, will be hard, will dry quicker than this does. And this might have a, depending on how much you put on and what you were putting it on, it could still feel sticky several hours later. And while it's still feeling sticky, you can actually get it off. But if I put that on and I looked at it and went, I liked the frame the way it was, but now I've got this on here, I guess I have to do the whole thing. No, you don't. You just have to start wiping it off immediately or within 15-20 minutes. And give it a good spray down with water, and off it comes. This is also why you never want to start working with the antiquing gels over a painted surface that you have painted until the paint has dried at least 48 hours. Otherwise, when you start doing the scrub that you have to do, either to wipe back or to remove it if you don't like it, and the water you've put on it, you're going to start lifting the paint because the paint has not cured. Once the paint is cured, you can spray it with water and no issues, and even scrub the surface. But now I'm back to the original frame. Nobody would ever know I put any antiquing gel on it. But I wanted you to see how the antiquing gels, especially the metallics, can change something. The tonality is all different depending on what you need, what the picture is that's going to go in here. And I think you can probably see why, looking at this, why my favorite gold is the softer one, the mix of 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne. It comes into a softer antique gold. This is a very bright gold. There's times you would want a very bright gold. But if I were using the bright gold, I would not use it in the valleys. I would use it on the highlights. And the same thing down here with the champagne. The champagne over this color in the valleys does not look as nice as the champagne just dry brushed to bring out the details. And the gunmetal actually, with the blue in it, with the copper, actually goes either way for helping with the frame. And the black is a really nice accent. If you put white on this, it's going to be really a stark, garish look that will make this frame look really, really cheap. So if you're working with darker tones, you want to use the brown antiquing gel, the black antiquing gel, the warmer metallics, your cooler metallics on a cooler base color or a lighter finish, like the other frames we're working on. This is copper that I did not use on this because it really would have made no difference on this frame. This is the gunmetal, which against the others you can see the blue pretty clearly. This is champagne, and hopefully you can catch that there's a golden undertone to this. This is the mix that I make for myself of 2 parts gold, 1 part champagne, and this is gold on its own. I thought it was worth you seeing what these metallics look like up close to see what their tonality is. Hopefully you could see from this video, there's a lot of options with the antiquing gels. They change things quite a lot or very little depending on what you want to have happen. You can always layer them, you can mix them, you can use them in a whole range of different surfaces. They have the top coats so they can be used indoors or outdoors on things. So in the process of thinking about things you want to change, keep those antiquing gels in mind. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you see all of our videos. And please do take the time to subscribe. It is the only way that we get any monetary benefit at all from the fact that we are providing these videos to you for free. Thanks for joining us.
Get it.
Oh! Come here, you stupid ball!
Get the ball. Get it. Get the ball. Get the ball.
Whoa, so close!